So we're here with Ginny Carpenter of Anoto to talk about Anoto pens today. Hi, Ginny.
Hello.
So just explain to us what an Anoto pen is and what is digital about it.
Okay. Well, Anoto digital pen technology from a user's point of view is just like a pen. It looks just like this. It writes with a ballpoint tip, just like a regular pen. But what's digital about it is that underneath the ballpoint tip is a digital camera, a tiny digital camera, that actually takes pictures at 70 times per second. And what it's taking pictures of is a unique dot pattern that Anoto has invented that is printed on any regular paper form that you might need in a healthcare setting or any other industry setting. The digital part of it is the digital camera underneath the tip of the pen.
And why has Anoto found that healthcare is interested in Anoto pens?
Well, we've had lots of partners over the years involved in healthcare applications. I think what is particularly compelling about our technology in healthcare is the unique focus of trying to get medical records electronic. Obviously, that's a big focus in healthcare IT. But you'll hear all kinds of statistics about how many healthcare practices, inpatient and outpatient, that are still heavily paper-based. And we believe that one of the reasons that's the case is because the data capture options that are out there are actually finite. There's only a certain number of ways that you can actually capture information and make it digital. You can type it in. You can use either a laptop or a desktop computer. You can use a tablet PC. You could do voice recognition or transcription. And then you could use a digital pen. And what we feel is that other than the digital pen, most data capture options are very, shall we say, intrusive to the workflow. And we have found lots of practices who, outside of the fact that they would be having to make a large equipment investment to go electronic, have to make a big workflow interruption commitment, which can be just as, if not more expensive than the equipment investment itself, in terms of training people on how to use a new program on a computer, training them to use a laptop versus something else. Our technology, from a user's point of view, simply allows the users to change the pen that they're using. And that's very compelling, we believe, to any practices who just don't want to have to go through that process of changing how they do their work.
So we're about to get a demo from Suzanne Kogan of Shareable Ink of how they're applying the Anoto technology in healthcare. What is Shareable Ink and sort of how do they fit into your partner, ecosystem?
Sure. Well, Anoto is the inventor of this digital pen and paper technology. We are a licensing company. We have a completely indirect business model. So we license our technology to companies like Shareable Ink, who we see as, and Shareable Ink in particular, as being industry experts. The technology is only useful when you apply it to specific business needs. And our partners need to be extremely knowledgeable about what those particular business needs are. So Shareable Ink in particular is very aware of the particular needs in healthcare and how digital pen can be a huge benefit there. Their CEO, Stephen Howe, I'm not sure if you're aware, is the founder of Patient Keeper. So he has been, since the 90s, acquiring information about the needs of the healthcare environment and data capture in particular. And so he brings the potential of digital pen and paper and makes it a benefit, a real-time benefit.
All right, well, thanks for joining us today. Let's move on with Suzanne and her demonstration of Shareable Ink medical forms.
Yep. So this particular example that I'm going to write on is an anesthesia record. It happens to be a two-sided form. Anesthesia paper forms are used at about 93% of hospitals. 7% document electronically. The rest are paper form-based. And we have various other examples of forms that we use in a healthcare setting, from the emergency department to daily progress notes to patient signature capture forms. But this particular example is of an anesthesia form, and I'm going to document on this as if I were an anesthesiologist, and I am pretty much writing on the form the same way today as I did before Shareable Ink came in. So I use the same form, I fill it out the same way, the only difference being that my pen now looks like this. It's a digital pen. So when I fill this out, I'm going to mark that the surgery happened today. I'm starting the case right now, so I'm just checking a box for that. I will say that I've done my equipment check, alarms are on and audible, we are doing a general anesthetic today. I will mark some signs on the vitals grid as the case is progressing. And then at the end of the case, I'm going to mark in an end time. And maybe I'm dealing with a patient, so I'm not going to check a box. I'm just going to write in the time. So I'll say it ended at 15:30. And when typically the workflow is I wheel the patient into the PACU, and while I'm communicating with the PACU nurse what happened to the patient, I simply pop my pen in a cradle, and all of the pen strokes that the pen captured are extracted from the pen, processed by the Shareable Ink servers, and returned to me in an electronic format. And that's going to show up on the screen at the computer that I docked my pen at. So when I dock my pen in a cradle that's attached to any PC with an internet connection, or I can connect wirelessly via Bluetooth, it asks me who I am, give it my name and a password if the hospital requires that, and here's my list of patients that I'm working on, and maybe I haven't finished reviewing the forms that I've completed. And top of the list is Linda Williams, which is the patient's form I was just writing on. It gives me her medical record number, the name of the person, which is me, who completed the form, and it tells me I'm missing something. So there are near real-time alerts that notify the physician of missing data elements, whether it's for quality purposes or for billing purposes. So in this case, I didn't document an ASA code, which is important for billing. I didn't fill in the particular operation or procedure that I did, and I didn't sign the form. So this is pretty valuable in cutting down the feedback loop between the provider and their billing department and or medical records. So I will just correct that. We gave him an appendectomy, and it's an ASA 3. Redock my pen, and so typically within a few seconds I now have a completely compliant document. And studies that we've done at our customer sites indicate that in general, on average, providers fill out, particularly anesthesia forms, maybe about 85% complete on first pass. And then these alerts pop up, and they're then 99 to 100% complete. So now I don't have any alerts, and just to show you what my form looks like in its electronic version, I'll open it up. It quickly shows me the handwriting, and if I turn that show text button off, I can see the scanned image version of my form, which looks just the way I had written it on paper. And if I turn the show text button on, it converts that handwriting into digital discrete data. So all of my numbers become numbers, words, wheat, latex become words. I have check boxes, radio buttons. If I scroll down a little bit, you'll see that where I checked a box for today and checked a box for start time, it's inserted today's date and the time that I made that checkbox. And you'll notice that some words are highlighted in yellow. That's the system's indication to look a little closely at that word. It's maybe less than 95% confident that the word has been recognized correctly. So if I right-click on the word, it tells me it's pretty sure it's morphine, 78% confident, but less sure that it's atropine or forane. So in order to make the handwriting recognition more accurate, we constrain lexicons or dictionaries behind each field. For example, in this field, we know that it's going to be one of a few drugs that are administered during anesthesia. So we constrain the dictionary behind that field to look at only drug names, which makes the handwriting recognition pretty accurate. That all looks good. And this could be the provider who's checking this work, or more commonly, it's often an admin assistant in the department or in the billing company or in medical records that might be validating this. So we have no alerts, it's been validated, I can complete this, and the form and the data elements from the form go off to their various endpoint locations, which is typically the billing system, the medical record system, the document management system, and any databases like a quality management database that is being used to extract data from these forms. So in the case of anesthesia, that's usually what's called SCIP measures, which is a Joint Commission requirement to capture things like the percentage of antibiotics that were administered prior to surgery. One more thing that's useful then in terms of the data output is the built-in analytics tool, which extracts data elements from regular paper forms that were written just the way I wrote them. And for each particular application that we have, there are reports and drill-down OLAP tools associated with that particular department or use case. So in the case of anesthesia, we have various efficiency reports, quality reports. So if I take a look at this one, time to anesthesia ready, this is looking at maybe across a group of providers or a group of hospital regions, how many minutes on average it took to get the patient into the OR and then get them ready for anesthesia. And most large groups, large anesthesia groups, measure this pretty closely. It's a critical measure, and they can certainly learn more about their provider's performance on this measure. So I'm looking at cases in the month of May, and I'm looking, in this case, across 3 regions. My East region seems to be an outlier because their average time is 15 minutes. So we can drill down to see why is that. So there are 2 hospitals in this region. Hospital G is much longer than Hospital F. And there were 3 providers in the month of May that documented cases at this hospital. And Dr. Huang here is taking 75 minutes. So why is that? So we drill down right into the days that he performed, and there's one particular day where his average minutes to ready time are 74, and it all happens to be on one case. So within seconds, I can drill down from a very macro level view to the micro level case or form itself. So in this particular example, we have the form, and it has some handwriting on it, but if I scroll down, I can see that, sure enough, the patient was in the OR at 7:25. Anesthesia ready was not till 8:39. And if we take a look at what happened here, it was difficult intubation. So that might be the reason. But it could be a reason to identify a pattern among a particular group of providers.
So would you say the analytics piece is the main reason you would use these paper forms over, say, an iPad with the same forms put in software in an app?
Not necessarily, because analytics can be derived from any kind of electronic data input. The reason why we're focusing on paper is because essentially it's the lowest common denominator, and if you walk into any hospital today, the vast majority still use paper medical records, and even if they're paperless, they may be scanning that paper 4 days post-patient discharge. So going in, for example, into the anesthesia, into the OR, even if you put an iPad in the anesthesiologist's hands, 9 times out of 10 there's a paper chart that needs to go with the patient to the PACU, meaning the anesthesiologist would then have to print out a version of what they just wrote or typed in the iPad and stick it in the chart so that along the way other people taking care of the patient have that information accessible.
Can you give us a demo of how the dot pattern hooks up the pen and the monitor?
Sure. So the form itself has a slightly gray sheen to it. It's printed on ordinary paper, as I mentioned, the same form that's in use at the hospital or department or physician practice today. But what that gray pattern is a microscopic dot pattern, and I will pull up a form here on my monitor. So this is what it looks like before I print it out. If I drill in to this PDF, about 1,200 or so %, you can see that what the dots are actually little L shapes. And if you imagined an XY grid here, each L shape is slightly offset from the grid and can be oriented in 4 different directions. And what that means is that every single piece of paper that gets printed out has a unique pattern of these L shapes. So it's like a watermark on the page. So my pen can differentiate between this form for Linda Williams, this form for Michael Moore, this emergency department chest pain form for Nelson Goudreau. and I can write on as many different pieces of paper as I want to with one pen. It will always know which piece of paper I'm writing on for which patient, which date of service, and where on the form I'm writing on it.
Why does Shareable Ink seem to have caught on with anesthesiologists? Is it because you've started with those forms first, or?
Partly that, but also we discovered very early on, and through the fact that our chief medical officer is also an anesthesiologist, that anesthesia, probably more so than any other specialty, is very, very paper-driven. So the statistic is 93% of hospitals use paper anesthesia records, partly because the anesthesia EMRs out there have to be very, very specific for that particular specialty, and there just aren't that many of them out there, and they tend to be expensive. And there isn't a good ROI to buying them. So they're usually a back burner item for hospitals. And they continue to be so with hospital IT resources and time taken up now with CPOE and meds reconciliation and everything to become meaningful use compliant. Anesthesia EMR is still one of those back burner items. So that's one reason. The other reason is because anesthesia groups, the trend is that they are becoming larger and larger. So you have few anesthesiologists that are employed by hospitals, many more that are employed by a group that might be a national group that contracts with, hundreds of hospitals across the country. And they are the ones that really feel a need to not only streamline their own billing processes, because they need this documentation as soon as the case is done in order to send out the bill or the claim, but they also need to be able to objectively measure the performance of all of their providers that could be scattered around the country to not only prove the quality of service they deliver to the hospitals that they contract with, but also win new contracts with new hospitals. So it's a combination of those factors as to why it's pretty prevalent in anesthesia.
What other specialties have you reached out to?
Well, we've done a lot in the emergency department area. We partner with a company called T-System, which has about a 48% market share of emergency department physician documentation through their T-sheets. They're prevalent in about 1,700 hospitals. And again, it's a very, very quick, easy way for a busy emergency department physician in a somewhat chaotic environment to be able to document and be compliant with Joint Commission regulations and various other regulations and their billing requirements. We've also done a lot in the physician progress notes, so inpatient daily progress notes, which is, again, a very paper-driven environment. And then on the ambulatory side, we're working with some ambulatory EMR companies to be a data input tool into the EMR, whether it's something that the physician enters because of their personal preference or their specialty, they don't particularly like to type, or whether it's a form that a patient fills out in the waiting room for their medical history, and the data then populates discrete fields within the EMR.
Well, it's a very interesting technology. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And remember, you don't know HIT until you've read SearchHealthIT.com.